Hello,
yes,
everyone.
we can hear okay.
You can hear me. Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Fatini. And yeah, I guess I'll say a few words about. I'm trying to look up at the camera, but also at my laptop here. So, and the people in the room. So, in any case, I guess I'll say a few words about myself first before I kick off. But I've been around UCL and lurking for about 24 years. I came over in 2000 from the States to study Egyptology over at the Institute of Archaeology. And then stayed on for my doctorate, which finished in 2007. And then I've had various postdocs that took me from conventional Egyptology, looking at archaeology and image and script especially, and the materiality, the physicality of ancient writing systems. That's really my personal passion, but needing good imaging techniques in order to look at text and image in detail and look at the physical traces of human activity on artifacts and understand both the production and consumption and life history of inscribed objects has really been what pushed me towards digital imaging technologies. And I've held a series of postdocs going back to Trinity College in Dublin, working on a digitization program for papyri, then moving to the University of Oxford, developing a reflectance transformation imaging system, which I'll say a bit more about, and testing now on collections at the Ashmolean Museum, collections and archives in the British Museum, etc. And then I had a couple of postdocs out in Germany, in Berlin at Free University and the universities of Cologne, where I was working on ancient historical documentary evidence ranging from the Near East to the Herculaneum papyri, pilot testing different techniques there. And then I also, actually I should say before that, when I was still at Oxford, I also came to UCL briefly in 2010. And I was working with Claire Warwick on the problem of the question of the death of the book, implementing new knowledge environments, the Canadian collaboration. And there I also was working with Melissa Terrace and ended up being incorporated or involved in the founding of the Center for Digital Humanities, which was just an amazing experience. And I can't believe that we're looking at 15 years. Now Melissa has moved on, of course, but when I finished up in Oxford, when I finished up in Germany and I came back to UCL, it was Melissa put me onto a couple of projects, and one of those was she was just setting up this multimodal digitization suite and had all this wonderful equipment and needed to have her multispectral system really to get it up and running. It was a bit buggy, and she had a PhD student, now Dr. Karis Jones, coming in to use it. So I was basically working with the software developers and working out the bugs so that it could be used for Karis's research project, and also teaching and learning and further research along the way. So that's really what got me sort of here, and then affiliated with the Department of Information Studies. So that's been sort of since 2010. And then I was away again in Germany, and then coming back in 2015. That's when I was working on the multispectral system and became more heavily involved as a consultant, also teaching and advising using that space. But in any case, yes, I've been around for a while, but I don't think I've connected with a lot of you to a great degree. And I hope that might change, because I'm just getting my honorary position renewed now, working with Jin Zhao. But in any case, I should cease and desist with saying a bit about myself and now look at the research that I'm doing that I wanted to share with you, to say a bit about the work that I've been doing that's been centering around the amazing facility that has been the UCL Multi-Modal Digitization Suite. So let's see, are my slides there we are. So what I wanted to do was give a brief overview of the suite. I know Jin has spoken to you several months ago, but more to some degree about it. But I wanted to take you through, if we have time, hopefully 3 case studies that sort of exemplify the kind of imaging modalities that I've been working with, and how those have fed into research-led teaching that I've done here and there, both for this DH and over at the Institute of Archaeology and elsewhere, and how those have also involved my research, the research of others, and importantly contributed to the teaching in a research-led way, which is something I think is very important, but also public outreach and working with citizen scientists and others. So yeah, I'll crack on then to say what you may already know or be aware of, that the suite has been part of the Center for Digital Humanities, but a joint endeavor with the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, Engineering, Library Services, even computing, computer science. And I mentioned one of my roles was in the consulting arm of the suite and trying to develop income streams for that, especially as our funding has sort of faded away over the years. So I made my appearance in 2015 with the support of Melissa, and then was working on, as I mentioned, the multispectral imaging system, setting it up, testing it, training up different students, including library rare book staff, involved in teaching, research, and consulting, and sort of effectively acting manager, which is something that we still desperately need. And we almost locked it in with some funding, and then Melissa went off to build a center in Edinburgh. So yeah, we are in a new space. I moved us to the new space, almost single-handedly inventoried the whole suite, and we've been there since then. But I hear that the suite might be moving. So and I'm not au fait with the latest on that. I talked to Steve Gray a little bit and to Jin Zhao, to Jin, and so I look forward to hearing what's happening with that. But yes, this is a shared facility for teaching courses such as the Intro to Digitization, and maybe some of you in the room or online have been part of that. But yeah, space for learning, research, and experimentation with digital tech. And I actually set up in 2016, it was 15, so that's me to correct that. Using state-of-the-art capture equipment for both 2D and 3D for both of those modes. And more recently, just before lockdown, with Adam Gibson and Simon Mani had got funding for our Brooker Tornado, which is an X-ray fluorescence scanner. But otherwise, we have a phase 1 multispectral imaging system that you see being deployed in the lower right-hand corner, a range of other equipment, and some of it has shown its age. It has been moved on to, has been put out to pasture. It's also about having the expertise and the need for it. So we still have a very high-end multispectral imaging system and the equipment to do things like conventional photography, some multi-band photography, reflectance transformation imaging that I'll say a bit more about, yeah, and I just got a couple images there that show some of the students, and you might recognize Marco Humble, Kinda Dahlin, and Mona, I forget, Alien, I think, who were part of our department, and Marco is still with us. But running training courses and in order to make our facility available more widely, but also to provide an income stream. So what I wanted to do is present to you 3 different case studies that sort of exemplify the type of work that I've done over it's been quite a while now. So over the years. So this particular one involves a mysterious mummy coffin lid that has been held in the Chiddingstone Castle in Kent. And so this was, I had Karis Jones as an assistant on this, and she played a vital role. But the council hasn't been able to discern the name of the individual to which this Egyptian coffin lid belonged. This dates back to about 750, 650 BCE, and it's just the lid of a coffin. We don't have the mummy, we don't have the base or the bottom of the coffin, but it's plastered and painted, and it's seen some difficult times. And the name of the deceased should be inscribed on the footboard. You can see that in the red rectangle, that area, and it's very abraded, and it's been impossible to read the name of the deceased there. So Karis and I packed up, hired a van, we packed up the system, and we went down into the castle and set it up to image, see what we could extract from that area of the coffin lid. So this is just to show you the system as it's set up in the previous location of the suite. And then we've got an object it's Egyptian, it's a mummy cartonnage, which we'll talk about shortly, from the Petrie Museum. It's made of multiple layers of papyrus or linen. Sometimes those layers are inscribed. and wanting to both image the object itself, but see what's inside, that's going to feature in another case study that I'll show in a minute. But in any case, just to give you an idea of the system, that we have a camera mounted on a copy stand. We have an array of LED lights set up on both sides that emit on particular wavelengths. And then we have a series of filters to filter or pass different wavelengths. And this can help us capture features that might not be visible using conventional photography or within the visible range. So I just wanted to say a few words about what we mean by spectral imaging and how it's different from what we get with a normal RGB camera, and what the human vision system can perceive. So that is what we see is between 380 nanometers and 750 nanometers, and those are the colors of the rainbow, you know, that we can see. But our system can see further into the ultraviolet and also into the IR, the near IR, so up to about 1,000 nanometers. And depending on what kind of minerals, pigments, materials you're using, sometimes we can actually detect those minerals, pigments, binders, and things just because they're visible in certain wavelengths. So that's a form of non-destructive analysis of materials as possible with this system, but also seeing what lies beneath, hence part of my title, what can lie, you know, under drawings, beneath layers of paint, but also making visible pigment that does some very groovy stuff under certain radiation conditions. So I'll say a bit more about this in a moment. But so this is just sort of a drawing that Adam Gibson put together that sort of tells you about the main components of the system. We've got a camera or a sensor. I don't know if you can see my arrow. Our upgraded camera has a 100 megapixel sensor. It's achromatic, meaning it captures in black and white. And then we emit light towards the target object on different wavelengths, ranging from the short wavelengths in the UV to the longer wavelengths of the IR. But we have a silicon sensor, so we can't do things as wonderful as maybe the James Webb Space Telescope that's out in space, detecting very far into the far infrared, the heat emitted from very distant stars at the edge of our universe. But with the silicon sensor, we are sort of we can go up to about 1,000 nanometers, 940 nanometers before it's the information it starts to fall off. So this is the we have a filter wheel as well to filter light in and out. You not only have light that is emitted and reflected off the target object, sometimes the object itself will reflect light back in particular ways. So we'll look at that in a moment, but this is just sort of what a capture sequence kind of look like as the different wavelengths. This is the near IR, where we under these wavelengths, it becomes invisible to the human eye, but that's where we can sort of start to see materials that are absorbent of radiation, of infrared radiation versus reflecting. And sometimes that's where we get important contrast for things like Herculaneum papyri, black papyrus, black ink. The papyrus is reflective of IR, the ink is absorbent of IR, and you get contrast that allows you to read text, those particular texts. Anyway, that's a tangent. I've gone off, so to focus back on our coffin lid, we've got the system set up here. You can see the filter wheel, the camera mounted overhead, the light arrays on the side, and we've been able to remove the footboard to image that specifically. So you can see a hieroglyphic inscription on the lower part of the coffin lid, and you can see the offering formula there, where it, I'm sure you can all read this just fine, where it says the list of various offerings for the ka of, that's the spirit, that one aspect of the deceased, for the ka en ka, and then we should have the deceased name here. I don't think my mouse it's moving, but it's delayed. Apologies for that. But in any case, you can see it looks like there's nothing on the image on the right. Yeah, and that's the key where we have this hieroglyph that looks like a zigzag like water, and then upraised arms, Nka is what that says, for the spirit of, and then we should have the deceased name. So we know where it should be. Can we read it? So we, Karis Jones, now Dr. Karis Jones and I imaged the coffin footboard, and this is a normal RGB photo. You really can't see a lot, maybe some black lines. We imaged it in infrared at 940 nanometers. You can see some of the carbon ink is coming up a little bit that outlines the hieroglyphs, but it's only when we use something called visible induced infrared luminescence that we get those signs pinging out and visible to a degree that we can read the deceased's name. And what's happening here is the Egyptian artist used something called Egyptian blue, which is an artificial pigment. And when you apply like red light at about 600 nanometers, the pigment itself gets excited and it in turn emits on a different wavelength in the IR. And so we filter out the visible light that we're emitting onto the object and only allowing what is reflected to pass through to the camera sensor. And that's where we get this visible light induced, and then infrared, and then it's luminescing or luminescing on the infrared at about 630 nano. 636 is emission, and then reflection is in the IR. So after consulting various Egyptological sources and colleagues, I was able to find various attestations of the particular spelling of the individual's name, and we think that the person who once occupied this coffin was called Iret Horeru, which means the eye of Horus is against them, and it's an apotropaic name. There's a word for it. It's a protective name that Horus is guarding. The eye of Horus is guarding against one's enemies. So that was quite exciting for the castle, for all the school children that would come and look at the coffin lid, and we ended up in the Kent Online or in the newspaper, a few articles about it. But that was really quite a nice sort of arc there with a consulting job that fed into research that Karis was doing for her PhD. We were able to contribute something to our nation's heritage. Mind you, it's come from Egypt, but the acquisition, the provincing of this object, I do believe is all above board according to UNESCO conventions. But there is, as an ambassador for ancient Egyptian heritage in Kent, and getting school children all excited, because who doesn't love a mummy? In any case, that's one example. Let me just look at the time and see how we're doing. So I've got a couple more. Let's see how we go. This is more research heavy. This is where, using our multispectral system, I collaborated with the College of St. Mary's in Texas, where he was pilot testing a method for integrating spectral imaging with the technique I mentioned briefly called reflectance transformation imaging. It's a raking light technique, and I've got a slide to explain that in a moment. But in any case, it was about, his goal is to try to integrate these techniques which deliver both increased contrast and allow you to see things that aren't visible under visible light, but also to capture high details, surface information, which can be very important for conservation, planning conservation interventions, but also if we wanted to study, say, painting techniques or printing techniques. We need both that fine surface texture information. So this has application across archives and collections, but this was the test, the pilot that I assisted with, using some of these objects, which are panel paintings or Roman portraits from the Petrie Museum. So I selected 3 that had different problems with their condition, and you can see some of them are just in very difficult condition. But in any case, I ran this experiment where, I can just say a bit about them. They're from the Fayum in Egypt, and they are encaustic. So that encaustic on wood, which is colored wax, that is then applied to lime wood or other kinds of wood. And as you see, variable preservation, complex surfaces. You can see the undulation in the one in the lower right. They're very kind of deformed, and they flux and fluctuate and move while they're sitting in the museum, because as the humidity and temperature change, and this does mean that they're kind of degrading, and they do need conservation pigment. The paint or the encaustic is delaminating and things. So imaging them very thoroughly like this effectively gives a condition report, and just documents them in a way, can act as a preservative measure, at least digitally. But they do present an imaging challenge because they are of in an undulating shape, sometimes quite curved, yeah, so, yeah, we wanted to learn about their condition, past artistic practices, maybe even trying to understand the materials, the tools, the techniques of their production, as well as sometimes being touched up. So we were marrying up multispectral imaging with this technique called reflectance transformation imaging, which is a raking light technique. You apply light in a very particular way. The camera does not move, the object you're imaging does not move, so that's different from photogrammetry. It's the light source that moves. There's a light array depicted or shown here in the lower right corner, where we have lights in different positions. You can see the camera in the center. And with this system, you would simply take a series of photos with a different light coming on in each photo to give you the shadows and highlights in different locations. And then you merge those together, and that allows you to create a file, an image where you can relight the surface and give the appearance of 3D. So this can be great for making something readable or understanding the physical structure, as in the case with these mummy portraits. And there's just a publication about this particular technique. But what I wanted to do, I did want to say you can apply it to small objects, or you can take yourself out to, as I did, to the Philae temple in the south of Egypt with the team, and we were doing imaging on this wonderful, massive stela where it had been damaged, trying to recover the hieroglyphic inscription. So it's a technique that can be applied under a microscope and all the way up to large scale surfaces, as you see here. So this relates to this postdoc I mentioned I had in Oxford, where I had first trialed RTI on this beautiful mummy portrait. She's featured in the news, they've done conservation on her. So I did pre-conservation documentation, and we discovered that she had gone through a lot of touch-up and alteration prior to she was a purchase. But in any case, she was mounted on this backing board, and it was starting to cause these cracks in the surface and really tear it apart. So they needed to remove her from that backing board. But you can see the kinds of images in the lower part there that we get with RTI that really help flesh out fine surface detail. I wanted to briefly, if this will work, take you to the file of her, the output. Let's see if there we go. So this is just a close-up of her face. And this is the RTI viewer, it's a freeware. And this allows you to manipulate the light position. So I'm grabbing with the mouse, hopefully this will behave. And the light is right now at the apex of the zenith, sort of straight directly overhead. But when I move the light, you'll see this, this change appear in the main screen here. So I don't know how high resolution that's coming up for you, but if we apply rendering modes to the surface, this will allow, and we zoom in, this will allow you to hopefully see slightly more compellingly how there is a lot of information on the surface there, but it only really becomes clearer or apparent as we, for example, increase the gain, the rise and fall on the surface. So this helps flesh out, for example, the fact that we've had original surface material has been lost. And then where's my mouse? There it is. And then you can see that there's been touch up here, both through the difference in color. Also, you can see more clearly the lines of where the original material is missing. That's a bit too, let me see if that'll come up. So this just helps us distinguish more clearly, for example, original from modern interventions. So you can see as you increase the gain, you get more texture, more information. We can also increase the spec, remove the color information, and now we're just looking purely at luminance information, light and shadow. And this can also help us see in more detail things going on the surface. There's her ear ring. You can see how the artist has built up, I hope, sorry, has built up the, there's a lag, sorry folks, there. It's an emerald and probably a pearl. But in any case, if you need to understand the actual surface features, that's, it's important to have these kinds of visualizations. But it gives you the appearance of 3D, not the real geometry, which is an issue. But let's go back to the PowerPoint now. So here, just to give you an idea of some of the other visualizations where you can see the paint strokes, you can see in detail how this work was, how the encaustic was actually laid down, and then some of the surface damage and things. So this type of information with with the integrated spectral RTI that we were trying to see how well we could bring these two types of image data together. So there is our multispectral system set up with the light panels on the side, and I imaged it using the multispectral imaging method, and then pulled those lights away, and then undertook the RTI, where with a handheld flash, I created a virtual dome of light, tongue-tied here, and undertook the RTI capture sequence. I'm kind of moving through this quickly because I only have a short slot to speak to you, so a lot of this may not quite make sense, but hopefully you just get a rough idea of the differences between looking further into the electromagnetic spectrum versus manipulating the light in particular ways to get surface texture information. So I was testing both the processing software and the technique generally. Outputs included accurate color that you see on the lower left, extended spectrum, and pseudo color, which can give us other information about surface shape. Here's just a couple of details. Here we see extended spectrum gives us enhanced visualization of texture and technique. We can see quite clearly where material is missing. Here we can get the texture to ping out even more. You can see the painting technique, how that's been adjusted, and the encaustic's been built up again for the jewelry. But the false color, the red, this is actually where that material, that color is missing. Here we have the craquelure, or the sort of damage, the cracks in the caustic, and we can sort of see how that's faring. If we want to monitor objects in the collections to see how they're doing over time, things that are on display versus not, moving things from A to B. But on loan, if you need to monitor how things are doing for purposes of insurance or what have you, you get this particular detailed information. Here, looking at this is a pseudo color image where we can see more clearly the different stages in the painting of, for example, her collar, where there's been different paint brushes possibly, and also paint strokes techniques, as well as materials used. Here we have an example of, the corner of one. These panels were actually placed over the deceased's face and bound into the mummy wrappings. And so we have, and often resins were used to sort of wrap the bandages around the mummy. And here we see some of that textile and some of that resin sort of embedded together. And we can see to a good degree the presence of the textile, but with the PCA processing and pseudo color and getting we can actually penetrate and pull out sort of principal component analysis, is where we're pulling out some of the information that isn't necessarily visible when using, without sort of false, without normal color information. So that's quite interesting to see how we can again see what sort of lies beneath. So textile specialists might have need for understanding this kind of information. So we're getting a lot of information in one go that can be of relevance to anything from conservators, those studying painting techniques, looking at condition, public engagement. These are quite compelling images that can be quite exciting for citizen scientists, for the general public, school kids, understanding a bit more about the past. The final case study I wanted to share with you is a collaboration that was led by Melissa just around the time that she was leaving us. But this was an international collaboration, really quite exciting, where we were looking at cartonnage, or as I already mentioned, multiple layers of papyrus or linen that are then they're made as a sort of a molded over the body, used as sort of casings, and then painted, plastered, and then painted. But sometimes inside, when it is papyrus, these are old office papers. These are materials that are being recycled and used within the cartonnage, but they often carry important information. So the cartonnage are artifacts in themselves, but within is another type of object. And unfortunately, we find in the past the practice has been to destroy these mummy casings to get at the texts. So we were trying to see what can we do with different imaging modalities to try to get to see what's inside without destroying these objects. So this is a piece that we placed over the head of the deceased. So as I mentioned, recycled written papyrus. The inks can be carbon or iron based, and that will make a difference for the way in which we can recover writing inside. So yeah, how can we disassemble these and extract the papyrus virtually, without destroying these objects? And this is a while ago, it's about a decade ago, right? But this is like there was a conference, an event organized where people were learning how to destroy the cartonnage to get at the text inside. And this is what we really want to stop doing. So let's see if so I developed, in order to test these different imaging modalities that we had lined up with our international collaborators, I developed a phantom or a test object, so modern papyrus, and then went over to our wonderful Institute of Making after collecting materials together with the advice of some of the colleagues over at the SLAID, Ruth Siddall, and it was on a pigments project there, and I've just forgotten my other colleague's name, apologies to her, but in any case, getting together iron oxide, iron oak galls, and other materials, binder, gum arabic and things, and making replica inks. Carbon, a red ink, red iron oxide, and then iron gall ink. And then we had a modern ink as a also to compare with. And so there are 4 layers of papyrus here. I've inscribed on each layer a cross made with the different inks, so we could see how far can our different techniques penetrate. We didn't expect much from the multispectral because really the near IR can only penetrate 1 millimeter or 2. Whether we're reflecting or passing the IR through the object can make a difference, but here you can sort of see how we could see down through the layers, about 3 layers, and then with false color, making that maybe a bit more visible, but really we're not doing great in terms of getting to that 4th layer. And these cartonnage do even have to put a plaster and paint bait on top, as so getting through that can be quite difficult as well. And there are other colleagues working on this. This is a problem with the Herculaneum papyri as well, these rolled up scrolls. But in any case, that was sort of the extent of my contribution to the project, but which is published, Gibson Piquette et al. Of 2018. I can give you the reference if you're interested, but in any case, we did find that no single modality that we tested, from multispectral, transillumination, OCT scanning, X-ray, different penetrative techniques, and something called terahertz. And so really no single imaging modality could identify both the iron or the carbon-based inks. And that's an issue because the papyri that are recycled in these mummy casings or cartonnage, both kinds of inks can be present. And so you might, like, black ink will be the carbon-based up until the Ptolemaic period, till the Greeks come onto the scene. But then the red inks are iron-based, and that won't be picked up by the IR. So in any case, it was the terahertz imaging that was what's certainly the most successful with the carbon-based inks. But this was just preliminary work, and how many people have a terahertz imaging system sitting around? Not many. So it really is also about trying to find low cost, easily accessible techniques that can allow us to do imaging and find out what lies beneath. But this was a sort of a first test on that, which was a great thing to be part of. But it does also exemplify the kind of work that we can do with a multimodal digitization suite that is, that needs to be brought into the, it's aging now, but there's so many wonderful and exciting things that we can do to ensure that we are providing our students with research-led teaching, research opportunities, working with, international collaborations, with industry, et cetera. There's just so much work to be done when it comes to looking after, cultural heritage, documentary evidence in our archives, and even here at UCL, don't have time obviously to talk about that, but there's some really interesting stuff that we've done with, and of course, all the other colleagues who are affiliated with the lab, who are working even more, to a greater extent than I've had the privilege to. But yeah, there's a little summary of the things that I've tried to present today, perhaps a bit too quickly in some cases. But this is something I'm really passionate about, and I must say I'm really thrilled to now have my honorary position renewed with you for, I think it's 3 years. And I hear from Steve Gray and from Jin that there are plans afoot for the moving the suite, that getting funding to upgrade it, and hopefully that it can serve the UCL community even more widely. But I'll certainly be applying my knowledge and some of it is it's in the past, but there's still a lot there and I'm still doing some things sort of in the present, but until the suite is really more up to speed, we're sort of hampered by that. But I am also working over the Institute of Archaeology with colleagues there, in the photography lab there with Antonio Reyes, and I've been teaching there on at the MA level for digital humanities. Let me try that again. Digital heritage management. And some of that does deal with digitization and advanced imaging. But in any case, I will stop there. I listed people who I would like to acknowledge for their support, and especially Melissa, Simon, and Adam, and now all of you in the room as well for coming today. And I thank you for your attention. And if you'd like to pose any questions, I will do my best to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kathryn. Do you want to stop sharing your slides so we can see the face?
Yes.
All right. Hi, everyone. Okay. Oops. All right. So, any questions?
There's a question in the chat.